all set? Everybody's good?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us here at the H. Lee Dennison building. I want to thank my colleague who is here with me, Legislator Monica Martinez, and I want to acknowledge and welcome a number of civic and community advocates who are here, school officials, representatives of various organizations in the community. And most importantly, I want to welcome the parents of Kayla Cuevas, a beautiful young woman in our community who was murdered. And Evelyn Rodriguez and Freddie Cuevas have both, through their pain and anguish at this incomprehensible loss, have used their voice to help advocate for other kids in the community and advocate for making sure that we do everything that we can to protect our kids in the community. We're here today in the aftermath of 4 brutal murders in Central Islip, here to communicate the message that our resolve is strong and that it is our objective not only to solve these murders, that is first and foremost, to bring justice to the families, but, as the police commissioner has said, and I support fully, to eradicate MS-13 from our county and from our island. This criminal organization that is preying on kids in our community. Now, I am confident that the Suffolk County Police Department, in collaboration with our federal law enforcement partners and other law enforcement agencies, under the leadership of Commissioner Sini, are doing everything that they need to do on a from a law enforcement perspective. But in order to solve this, in order to achieve our objective over the long term of eliminating this criminal organization from our county, we're going to need to do more than just traditional law enforcement. And this is a moment when there are kids in the community who are murdered in the most brutal way. This is a moment for everyone to come together, put aside the politics and the partisanship, not retreat to ideological camps, but to come together and say, we're going to do what it takes to make sure that we are protecting our kids, protecting our communities, and eliminating this criminal organization from our county. Now, that will take a comprehensive approach. It will take collaboration. It will take all of us coming together. One thing that at the outset I will say that would, I think, absolutely have an incredibly positive impact on what we're talking about here today is for Washington to come together and adopt comprehensive immigration reform, to fix a broken immigration system, to both secure our borders and also provide for people who have been living here for years, in some cases decades, as law-abiding individuals contributing to a society, providing them a pathway to citizenship, pulling people out of the shadows. But I think there are common sense measures that we can take to help fill the gap in a federal program that is designed to help some of the most vulnerable individuals escaping some of the most desperate circumstances, and to make sure we weaken MS-13's clear effort to try to take advantage and victimize the most vulnerable among us. So the things I think that we can do to help fill some of those gaps, to make sure we're doing everything we can to protect and to undermine MS-13's efforts. Resources to local law enforcement agencies who are on the front lines in the battle against this criminal organization. Now, I'm not just talking about here in Suffolk County, I'm talking about all the agencies engaged in this battle here. So, whether you're talking about the U.S. Attorney's Office or FBI or Federal Gang Task Force, the agencies on the ground who are fighting this battle, an assessment to determine what resources are needed, if any, additionally, to fight this battle. We also need resources at the local level for the communities who are on the front lines here. We need gang prevention resources. And we need resources to the communities who are having the federal government place in the community. So this burden is not borne by taxpayers alone on the local level. We need to provide a community of support for these kids who are here to make sure that they are not susceptible to the work of MS-13 as they seek to pull them in and recruit them in, and in some cases force them in to the gangs. And that means gang prevention resources here on the local level. We need a process, additionally, we need a process that ensures that individuals with gang ties are not being placed in the community. And finally, notification to local municipalities and school districts. It's hard to know what to be prepared for or how to best focus your efforts and your resources to protect kids in the community if you don't have that information. So notification, establishing those notification procedures, I think, is another important step and common sense measure that we can take. I want to be very clear that the overwhelming majority of kids in the system who are coming here, again, oftentimes to escape the most desperate of circumstances, are successful, are reuniting with families, and successfully integrating into the community. At the same time, that does not mean that MS-13, this criminal organization, which is constantly adapting and adjusting, is not looking to those who may be the most vulnerable among this group in an effort to victimize them and to strengthen their organization. It's our job as policymakers, as public officials, as civic leaders, as school leaders, as immigration advocates, to come together and to say, what are the things we can do to help prevent that from happening? We're going to continue to move forward on the law enforcement front in our effort to eradicate MS-13 from this county. But we need to take a comprehensive approach, and we need to be doing all of these things. If we don't provide the structure, MS-13 will. If we don't provide the resources, MS-13 will. And we are not going to let that happen. I can tell you this community is not going to let that happen. At this time, I want to ask my colleague to come forward to say a few words before we take some questions. Legislator Monica Martinez. Thank you, Legislator.
Thank you, Frank. Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here today. I'm going to speak from the community aspect of it. I represent Brentwood and Central Islip and North Bayshore, the communities that have been hit with these brutal murders. And it's a community of hardworking individuals on an everyday basis. And it's time that we work together to make sure that those who are law-abiding citizens are there and are given the resources that are needed. Coming as a teacher and an administrator, I can assure you that the Brentwood School District and the Central Islip School District does everything possible to make this community a welcoming community. We do not turn away any kid, and that's because we're just loving individuals that care for our kids and want an education for them. But however, things need to also change. We have individuals that are living amongst us that are causing harm to those who are here trying to make a decent living and have that American dream that everyone who comes wants to have. I have worked with many community organizations, and let me tell you, they make that dollar stretch. Every funding that they receive, they make that stretch as much as possible, but more needs to be. And the county executive for his new proposal, and I definitely support it, especially if the emphasis for educational programs, for after-school programs, weekend programs, summer programs, mental health programs, services. It's another clear example why the federal government should prioritize in passing a comprehensive immigration reform. A system that was enacted in 1986, more than 30 years ago, must be updated and actually face what realities we are facing today. Let's improve cooperation between all levels of government for the good of our constituents. This is not a time to politicize the tragedies of our neighbors. We are absolutely better than that. As elected officials, we have the responsibility, as those elected officials, the trust that has been bestowed upon us by our constituents who have elected us. We need to put our personal things aside, as well as a political ideology to the side, and make sure that we work together to fulfill the promises that we have given to our constituents to not only protect them, but to make sure that they're safe and that they're given the proper resources that they are entitled to. I want to again thank every single individual who is here behind us. Your efforts do not go unnoticed. Ms. Rodriguez, whom I know very personal, I thank you for your advocacy and making sure that our kids are given the proper resources to the school districts that are trying their very best with the little money that they also get. So it's time that we all come together, every single level of government. It is not just a county issue. It is a state issue, it's a nationwide issue, and it's town issues. So we all need to come together and sit down and see how we can make this work, not only for those who are in the communities trying to have their lives, but for the entire county, for the entire state. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Legislator. With that, we'll take any questions.
You're asking for federal dollars. This comes at a time that federal programs are being slashed by more than 30%. How much are you asking for, and how do you think we can achieve it in this climate?
Well, I would say we would disagree with a lot of those federal cuts that are happening, but if we can't make this a priority, then I don't know what we can. This is, and this should be at all levels of government, a top priority. On the local level, we have made clear we are going to do everything that we have to do to eradicate this criminal organization, which has caused so much harm and pain to individual families and communities here in Suffolk County on Long Island. And I think that's an area where we can agree, or should be able to agree, that federal resources are warranted. Particularly in this case when you're talking about the placement of individuals in the community by the federal government. What we're saying is federal resources should follow as well.
So what is your message then to the president or to the federal government?
Our message is that we want to work together with our federal partners to advance an objective that I think every American can agree on, and that is that we have to do whatever it takes to eliminate this criminal organization from our shores, and do so in a way that is, in my view, respectful of our values as a nation, that protects the kids who are escaping desperate circumstances, and protects our communities as well.
What changes need to be made to the unaccompanied children program from your point of view? Specific changes in policy or procedure with the current system versus how you'd like to see it improved?
Well, I think what we're saying is there are things that we can do to strengthen it. Because as I said, MS-13, criminal organization, they are adapting and they are adjusting, and they're going to try to exploit any crack or any break in a system to go after vulnerable people. And in this case, we're talking about kids, vulnerable children. So some of the things that we're talking about here today are common sense measures that we think will fill some of those cracks, strengthen our ability to protect these kids, undermine MS-13's efforts to recruit. And that is by bringing resources where necessary to the law enforcement agencies, bringing the resources to the local level so that we can provide on a local level, I think it's very important, follow-up and oversight so that we can make sure the kids are transitioning successfully into the community. That's very important. We can't have a situation where kids are coming in and there's kids who, in many cases, as I said, are escaping desperate circumstances, have been through trauma themselves, and we're not providing that really comprehensive community of support that would help them. As I said, in the absence of us doing it, MS-13 will provide those resources, they will provide that structure. In addition, I think notification, a simple thing like notification, so that we can be working collaboratively together and we can be prepared with what we need to do, and a process ensuring that people with gang ties, individuals with gang ties, aren't being placed in the community. I think these are common sense things we can do to strengthen a program that is designed to help people in desperate circumstances, to help reunite families, things that represent the values of our nation. But at the same time, we have to understand that savvy criminal organizations are going to do everything they can to exploit opportunities in our efforts to do the right thing and to help people.
How do you do this, though? What does this look like? When you say we don't want someone with a gang tie coming here, how do you know who this person is? How do you know where they're going? When you talk about what's going to be going on in the schools, specifically, what is going to be going on in the schools?
Well, I think you're going to look at a number of different gang intervention programs, and it's a broad array of things, but putting them all together, it's providing the resources and the support that are necessary to help people to help kids make a successful transition. Now, I want to be clear again, as I said earlier, that overwhelmingly, the kids coming through these programs nationwide are successful, are reuniting with families. But that doesn't mean that MS-13 isn't targeting the most vulnerable among these to try to pull them in and recruit them into gangs. So you're talking about anything from mental health services, counseling, ESL classes, all of those things that would help with the transition, successful transition into the community.
But how will you know who they are? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Well, that's a different issue. That's about notification, establishing a notification procedure between the federal government and the local communities, and that's something we want to work with our federal partners to make sure we have a procedure in place where notification does occur.
Steve, so
Yeah.
last week, Congressman Peter King had said that MS-13 was training kids at home in Central America using this program that you're discussing as a pipeline, getting these kids caught at the border and being sent into communities like Brentwood and Central Islip to then spread the word of MS-13 and to recruit. Have you looked at the groups that take these kids and place them into these neighborhoods? I mean, has that been something that you guys have looked into?
I think that is an issue that obviously is important to examine, but I'll leave that to the law enforcement experts to speak on that particular aspect of this.
So I guess what we're wondering is, how would notification help?
Well,
I mean, right now districts are not aware when kids are coming in under this program?
well, they're aware when they come to the school to register. What would help is advance notice, notification in advance, understanding of what issues you may be dealing with, so that there's some preparation and understanding before that placement occurs.
Have you looked into, like, locally on Long Island, Catholic Charities is one of the groups that's responsible for taking these kids and placing them in homes. They take them in, is it up to them also to do some research on these people that they're placing in the community?
I think it's incumbent upon all of us, everyone involved in the system in the community, to be looking at what we need to do more effectively to make sure we're protecting kids and we're protecting communities. Obviously, when you have kids in the community who are brutally murdered in this way, we have to take a moment to look and examine and say, what do we need to be doing better? How do we make this work better? You know, the things we're talking about are very important, and the people coming through the system, young people, have come and reunited with families, been very successful. But that doesn't mean that there are not gaps here that MS-13 is taking advantage of, that we don't have an obligation to figure out and to fill. And that's what we're talking about now.
Sorry, are you suggesting like a caseworker for each child, like a county caseworker, like as if the child was in the foster care system, that somebody would be actively checking up on their transition, or?
Well, I think there needs to be real oversight and follow-up to make sure.
Is what I'm trying to get at.
I think that could be done by the federal agencies that are doing the placement, but I think probably it makes the most sense to provide those resources at the local level. These kids are coming into a community, they're coming into the school district. Make sure those resources that are there at the local level, as I said, provide that community of support, so that when they are here and they come here, they're reuniting with families, there is that follow-up, there is that, you know, checking on them to make sure that that transition is occurring successfully, because, as I said, we know that MS-13 is here, and they are following up with them, and they are pursuing them, and they are looking to recruit them. So in the absence of us providing those resources and gang prevention resources, MS-13 will fill the gap. They've made that clear.
Can we hear from some of the superintendents, if you don't mind? We haven't heard from them. Anything
Up to them.
you'd like to say?
Yes, I am Dr. McIntyre. I'm the superintendent of the Brentwood schools, and you know that we have had our fair share of tragedy within our district. And we have put into place a number of programs, particularly through the assistance of the county exec. We are going to be putting into place the STRONG program, which is an early intervention program to assist our staff to prevent students from getting into gangs. So the early intervention program will prevent that. But we do need, as the county exec indicated, we do need the resources, because very early when they get to us, we need the counselors, we need the social workers to constantly to fill that gap that currently exists in order to provide the support for our students, so that when the gang calls, we know that they're strong enough to resist the gang temptation.
Doctor, can you give us an idea of how many unaccompanied minors your district has had to absorb over the last couple of years?
The last information we received over 400 unaccompanied minors. And in addition to that, we have not received the resources, as the county exec indicated, from the federal government in order to be able to help us to provide all the resources and the help that those unaccompanied minors need.
400 this year?
Over a couple of years, 400.
So since 2014, how many unaccompanied minors?
We have over 400 unaccompanied minors.
Since 2014.
In the Brentwood system, yes.
I'm Dr. Howard Koenig. I'm Superintendent of Schools in Central Islip, and I wanted to kind of piggyback on what the county executive said, because we do provide social work services so that when youngsters come to our community and need assistance to transition from horrendous circumstances that they're leaving to come into our communities, that they have at least someone they can speak to, someone that they can rely on. The problem is that programs that we had in place that gave us the ability to provide some of these services are now being cut. There's a grant called 21st Century Grant, where we provided specific after school and before school help to youngsters. with that being cut, our local communities don't have the resources to step in and fill in that gap. And as a result, some of the things that are so necessary for these children are not going to be available to them. Now, we have people in our schools, in both of our districts, in Central Islip and in Brentwood, who teachers, social workers, teaching assistants, aides, who will hook up, will connect with children if they can. But there's just so many people to do it when you don't have the staff to go around. So it's very, very important that we get assistance from wherever we can. And so much of the assistance that we were getting from the U.S. Department of Education, from the federal government, we are now being told is going bye-bye. Century 21 is one example of that. In addition, we have people who are being trained to identify isolated children. The easiest targets for people like MS-13 are children that are isolated, that don't have a support system, either within the community, within the school, especially the unaccompanied, within their homes. We are trying to identify those children and get other members of our student body to hook up with these isolated kids. And, hi, you're sitting alone at the lunch? You mind if I sit with you? To make a connection with these children so that they know there is support for them within the community. The more feelings of support that they have, the less likely they are going to be vulnerable to the activities of groups like MS-13. But we can't do this by ourselves. We have the unfortunate, we have the property tax levy cap, which is not a terrible thing, but it does limit our ability to provide things to these students. So when you pile everything on top and then start to remove the resources we were getting from outside, it just makes it a very daunting task.
So, sir, what is the estimate of unaccompanied minors in your school district since 2014?
You know what? I don't want to give you a number that's inaccurate, but I know it's not. We're about half the size of the Brentwood School District, but with our demographic similarities, we are both suburban districts with urban demographics. With our demographic similarities, I would guess if they are twice as large, they probably got about twice as many youngsters as we have.
Last question, guys?
Thank you very much, Dr. And so again, go ahead.
Yes. You know, if you were able to write this check and have the federal government sign it, what number would you ask for?
It would be big, but you know, we don't have a dollar figure here yet. What we're trying to do is, again, put forward some common sense measures to work with our partners to strengthen our protection for kids and weaken MS-13. Everything we're talking about here today is about how we weaken MS-13, how we undercut their ability to target kids and recruit them into their gang. And our objective here, bring justice to these families, eliminate this criminal organization from our community, bring peace to these communities. We do that by undermining and weakening MS-13. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.